Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the Kevin Michael Grace Show. Just a couple of show notes. There won't be Theater Thursday again this week because I haven't been able to get the sound of my computer to work. But I am moving tomorrow to a permanent residence, so there will be no show tomorrow. But next week, everything should be back to normal, God willing. So I thought that I would start today's show with a couple of readings, which I think are germane to the situation today. The first one is from Edward Gibbon's famous The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. He wrote, "The decline of Rome was the natural and inevitable effect of immoderate greatness. Prosperity ripened the principle of decay. The causes of destruction multiplied with the extent of conquest. And as soon as time or accident had removed the artificial supports, the stupendous fabric yielded to the pressure of its own weight." Sic transit gloria mundi. Now, the other reading from another Englishman, Evelyn Waugh. And it is from his novel Scoop from 1938, which deals with a cub, a reporter, being sent to a country called Ismailia, which is kind of a mashup of Ethiopia and Liberia. The cub reporter's name is William Boot. William then noticed for the first time that a little flag was flying from the area railings. It bore a red hammer and sickle on a black ground. He descended to the basement where, over a door between two dustbins, a notice proclaimed, "Republic of Ismailia, Legation and Consulate General. If away, leave letters with tobacconist at number 162B. William knocked, and the door was opened by the Negro whom he had seen the evening before in Hyde Park. The features, to William's undiscriminating eye, were not much different from those of any other Negro, but the clothes were unforgettable. "Can I see the Ismailiate Consul General, please? Are you from the press?" "Yes, I suppose in a way I am. Come in. I'm him. As you can see, we are a little understaffed at the moment." The Consul General let him into what had once been the servants' hall. Photographs of Negroes in uniform and ceremonial European dress hung on the walls. Samples of tropical produce were disposed on the table and along the bookshelves. There was a map of Ismailia, an 8-piece office suite, and a radio. William sat down. The Consul General turned off the music and began to talk. "The patriotic cause in Ismailia," he said, "is the cause of the colored man and of the proletariat throughout the world. The Ismailiate worker is threatened by corrupt and foreign coalition of capitalist exploiters, priests, and imperialists. As that great Negro Karl Marx has so nobly written." He talked for about 20 minutes. The black-backed, pink-palmed, fin-like hands beneath the violet cuffs flapped and slapped. "Who built the pyramids?" he asked. "Who invented the circulation of the blood? Africa for the African worker, Europe for the African worker, Asia, Oceania, America, Arctic, and Antarctic for the African worker." At length, he paused and wiped the line of froth from his lips. "I came about a visa," said William diffidently. "Oh," said the Consul General, turning on the radio once more. "There's £50 deposit and a form to fill in." William declared that he had not been imprisoned, that he was not suffering from any contagious or outrageous disease, that he was not seeking employment in Ismailia or the overthrow of its political institutions, paid his deposit, and was rewarded with a rubber stamp on the first page of his new passport. "I hope you have a pleasant trip," said the Consul General. "I'm told it's a very interesting country." "But aren't you an Ismailite?" "Me? Certainly not. I'm a graduate of the Baptist College of Antigua. But the cause of the Ismailite worker is the cause of the Negro workers of the world." "Yes," said William. "Yes, I suppose it is. Thank you very much." "Who discovered America?" demanded the Consul General to his retreating back in tones that rang high above the sound of the wireless concert. "Who won the Great War?" Isn't that essentially the message of Black Lives Matter, that all of the advancements of civilization are due to the efforts of Black people, and that we've stolen the credit for this, we evil white people. So the first proper subject of my show is all hail Raz and his glorious new regime. There are some fascinating things going on in Seattle. And this from Reddit. It's called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. It's 6 square blocks. When you enter, you pass a "You are now leaving the USA" sign. Their leader killed himself today after being Me Too'd. He's a white Chapo House fan who beat the shit out of his girlfriend after she made an unknown transphobic joke in bed. Edit, he pussied out, just wanted to make people believe for several hours that he was dead. The same guy started taking testosterone inhibitors to rid himself of toxic masculinity. This was long before he was Me Too'd, a warning sign. The Seattle Police Department have already said they're going to do nothing and just let the protesters have their cute occupied area. The SRA, Socialist Rifle Association faction of Seattle, the John Brown Gun Club, have become the armed guards of the occupied area. They're making their own currency. The Communist Party of the USA has expressed its support. The Communist City Council member, who unlocked City Hall so protesters could break in and loot, has endorsed it. They have current plans to house every homeless person in Seattle in tents within the zone. They are trying to farm by planting seeds in some soil they spread over the concrete. The nearby park will be used as a runway for gliders carrying supplies in case the city blockades them, supplies from China. Already infighting and arguing who is top on the oppression ladder. Update, it's now 7 square blocks and the new Concord block as an evacuated police station. And yes, the Chaz, as they're calling it, now has a warlord, a Black Latino pimp named Raz Simone. He has declared himself leader and is going around assaulting white people with his gang members and waving around an AK-47. There seems to be some confusion whether this is an AK-47 or an AR-17 or an AR-15, but no question, they do have, as we would say in Canada, military-style firearms. Homeless people broke into their donated food supply and stole all the food. They're trying to strong-arm businesses into paying them community policing fees. This is due to a poll-tard successfully filming from the inside. DSA is now loan sharking to raise funds. City Hall invasion update. They banned men from speaking at the protest. Then a non-binary man went up and the crowd booed. And then he shouted, "I'm alphabet people and not a man." And they cheered. Let's see. This is from Fox News. Seattle law enforcement experts urge police to take back Chaz before it's too late. Officers effectively abandoned the area during violent clashes with demonstrators calling to defund the police. It can't continue like that. Jim Fuda, a law enforcement expert and the director of Law Enforcement Services for Crime Stoppers, which works with the Seattle Police Department, told Como News. Some action is going to have to be taken. Is there federal laws broken? Does the FBI need to come in? But at some point, arrests and these people are going to have to be removed if they don't move. Photos of the area show protesters have remained peaceful, pitching tents, painting, watching outdoor movies, and holding gatherings with music and speeches. But police have also said they have received numerous complaints about armed guards surrounding the perimeter and asking residents who live in the area to show ID. Police have also alluded to the potential extortion of local businesses and citizens. Despite concessions by the city, including a 30-day ban by Mayor Jenny Durkin on officers deploying tear gas to disperse large crowds, as well as police officers shuttering the 3rd Precinct and retreating from the area, protesters have not shown signs of allowing police back in. The situation is fluid, as they say, and there are all sorts of conflicting reports about this. This is from King 5 Seattle. On Wednesday night, President Trump tweeted to Governor Jay Inslee and Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan, telling them, "Take back your city now. If you don't do it, I will." Here's the tweet in full. Radical left Governor Jay Inslee and the Mayor of Seattle are being taunted and played at a level that our great country has never seen before. Take back your city now. If you don't do it, I will. This is not a game. These ugly anarchists must be stooped, sick. Immediately move fast. In response, Governor Inslee tweeted, "A man who is totally incapable of governing should stay out of Washington State's business. Stoop tweeting." Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan replied on Twitter with, "Make us all safe. Go back to your bunker. Black Lives Matter." In a second tweet, Trump followed up with, "Domestic terrorists have taken over Seattle, run by radical left Democrats, of course. Law and order." Sleepy Joe Biden refuses to leave his basement sanctuary and tell his radical left bosses that they're heading in the wrong direction. Tell them to get out of Seattle now. Liberal Governor Jay Inslee is looking the fool. Inslee responded on Twitter hours later saying the Trump administration knows what Washington needs right now, the resources to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't recall Durkan or Inslee ordering the thousands of people on the streets of Seattle to go home. In fact, it says stay home on Jenny Durkan's website. That's on her banner. But as we know, COVID-19 will not attack brave Black Lives Matter protester. We know this. It's been demonstrated by experts. Now, Jay Inslee, he's a weirdo. He's a serious weirdo. And, he had a press conference yesterday. Washington Governor Jay Inslee was stumped Wednesday afternoon when a reporter asked him at an online press conference about the takeover of part of downtown Seattle by radical leftists. "That's news to me," he said, laughing. Washington State. Not all Washington State is like that. Certainly King County is like that. And I suspect Bellingham is like that. But apparently Jay Inslee, he didn't know what to do. Let's see. Mark Zuckerberg from the School Project tweets, "Antifa take over an area of Seattle. No police presence. Within 24 hours, a man called Raz Simone declares himself the police. Raz is now armed with a gang and goes about beating up Antifa and BLM." Kind of like this guy now. Antifa don't know what to do. Intersectionality. Don't you just love it? The whole story tweeted, Raz Simone, a Seattle local, stated he belongs to the People's Force, a replacement for Seattle PD in Free Capitol Hill. On June 8th, in a live video, he advised that unfamiliar faces should be stopped, questioned, and checked to see if they're armed, similar to stop and frisk. Okay, so someone called RHGR has been posting a lot about this. This is interesting. Did the mayor, that would be Jenny Durkan, know that Seattle Autonomous Zone was being funded through sex trafficking? It's time to go federal. Here's another one. For 3 years, I heard protecting borders and putting up fences was racist. Antifa takes control of a neighborhood, and it's the first thing they do. Since the hippies created Seattle Autonomous Zone, emergency calls for rapes and robberies have tripled. And fund our new police force and you get my girls free nudes for life. Or get this bag if you ain't a simp. Just Cash App dollar moves to keep these girls working for justice. And there's really some disgusting pictures attached for this. Lifetime Snapchat, $50 content will be exclusive and only on that Snapchat. Cash App dollar moves. I put your Snapchat username in the payment comments. At the rally in CD, he gave his cash app for donations to build a new police force of their own, even claimed to have a building bought for their headquarters already. How about that? How about that? In a nutshell, the Seattle People's Protection Cash App is the same one used for pimping, a charge he and his girls, that would be Raz Simone, have denied. From Reparations Network, Raz Simone. So this is how you treating the ladies in the family, huh? You followed up this encounter with punching Omari in the face. Is this your king? Because it's giving enslavement and severe domestic violence. Okay. Okay, is this beginning to remind anyone? Well, you'd have to be quite old to remember this. Of the Symbionese Liberation Army and their General Field Marshal Cinque Mtume. Well, it reminds me of that. Raz Simone, the leader of the Seattle Autonomous Zone, arrested in 2012 for third-degree cruelty for a child. Okay. Let's be fair. Donald Trump didn't call Raz Simone a warlord. The internet did. Okay. All right. And I decided to respond to the governor of Washington because of my well-known sympathy for oppressed people everywhere. I asked, have you initiated state-to-state negotiations with General Field Marshal Raz, Supreme Leader of the People's Vegan Republic of Capitol Hill? If not, why not? A 1% increase in the Washington retail sales tax to feed the starving people of Chaz would be a good faith gesture. Okay. And someone called LD Timmy is also tweeting about this quite a bit. T Post Millennial writes, Andy No was in downtown Seattle yesterday and interviewed hip-hop artist and Black Lives Matter activist Raz Simone, who has been called the warlord of Seattle's recently occupied Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Pretty broad consensus that the police occupying the station is unacceptable. There is talk about wanting to return the land here to the Snohomish tribe, tweets Robert Evans. Yeah, intersectionality. More, please. Faster. Faster. And there were, 2 hours ago, cops are back in the precinct. One comes out and tell us they are cleaning up. 2 officers inside right now, it seems. People are not happy. It was reported earlier today that the people who are occupying Chaz and declaring themselves to have seceded from the United States of America were in a panic after reading or hearing about Donald Trump's tweets. And apparently there was some fear that they were going to be indicted on federal charges. Prairie Seahorses tweets, Raz Simone single-handedly humiliating the U.S. far left in practice makes Chaz the best Antifa LARP yet. And it's raining in Seattle. It rains an awful lot in Seattle, and it must be pretty miserable there. Okay. Let's see. Lenin is suggesting if Chaz does not prioritize decolonization or even talk about it, it's kind of hypocritical since Lenin didn't decolonize Russia and Stalin sure as F didn't. Some pretty serious conversations going on there in Chaz. So I don't know. Perhaps this is Chaz's last stand. But let's see. Raz Simone has a Twitter account, which he keeps up. So is there anything new from him? No, the latest is 2 hours ago. I didn't know this people this gullible, stupid, closed-minded, insecure, afraid, and hateful existed. They want so badly to believe I'm a terrorist, warlord, and every other negative thing they can collectively think up. Oh, and the claim of hacking. Sudip Tiwari, fearless Asian ally, tweeted to Raz, hackers got your accounts and posted this on your old timestamp. Sorry you have to go through this. And he claims to have been hacked himself. And he tweets, someone is creating false tweets from my page somehow, fake tweets that seem like they're from the past and they're from my account somehow. Shake my head. Y'all are ridiculous. He retweeted Jay Inslee, the would-be governor of Washington State. Raz, you can find his rap stylings on SoundCloud. And yeah, he must be, what's the phrase they use? He was turning his life around. But then he felt the warlord call, which is irresistible. Raz has a store. It's store.razsimone.com, where you can, they're all sold out. All his beanies, which are actually face masks, useful for looting, I suppose. They're all sold out. You can get a black umbrella mini duffel bag, a black umbrella hoodie, black umbrella socks, rare slides. Okay. His CD called Drive Theory, where he is pictured at dusk standing in front of what appears to be a very expensive sports car holding what appears to be a submachine gun. And crew neck, let's see, T-shirts, baseball caps, pumps for the ladies. He is quite the entrepreneur. And I'm sure the events in Chaz have definitely raised his profile. Guerrilla marketing, one could call it. Breitbart has a story, total blackout on the insanity in Seattle as establishment media turn focus from the autonomous zone. Several media establishments, writes Hannah Blow, including ABC News, NBC News, and CBS News, have largely failed to draw attention to the chaos in Seattle as demonstrators set up barriers, establishing their own police-free Capitol Hill autonomous zone. Media bias is not just in the stories that get covered, but the ones that don't, Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics, observed. Total blackout on the insanity in Seattle on major news websites, he added, providing screenshots demonstrating the point. Indeed, a Thursday afternoon look at the homepages of these media outlets revealed an absence of coverage about Seattle, a remarkable development given the fact that President Trump, late Wednesday night, explicitly warned state and local leaders to regain control of the city. Now, this reminds me of the WTO protests in Seattle in 1999. And I heard that something was happening. And so I went to CNN, and there was nothing at all on CNN. And I was rather shocked after I went to, Cairo, King, and Como. Those are the ABC, NBC, and CBS affiliates in Seattle. I was living in Vancouver at the time. And downtown Seattle was under siege by anarchists. And for several hours, they just smashed up everything in sight, and the police sat on their hands. And I suppose this won't be surprising to a lot of people. I suppose the police were feeling rather ill at ease because of their failure to do anything to protect property owners in Seattle. So at 5 o'clock, when the people working downtown started streaming out of their offices and tried to get home, the police harassed them. They just stopped them and demanded ID and where are you going? I mean, somebody had to be punished for the mayhem, and it turned out to be the decent, law-abiding citizens of Seattle. Before I move on to our Cringe Festival, Profiles in Cringe, I will take a look at the chat. Professor Jonathan Paul says, does Chaz have a university I can apply to for a professor job? Well, I understand, Professor, that you know an awful lot about Marxism. So that would definitely be in your favor. Mike F says, I didn't vote for Raz. I don't know, democracy is really passé. So is liberalism. You know, we've been instructed that when the bad people are elected, then it's not really a democracy. I think what's going on in Chaz in Seattle is an example of the people's will, which is, of course, we're seeing all across America, supposedly the people. Chadson, our moderator, says his music is terrible. Well, I'll take your word for it. Again, from Professor Pohl, what is the exchange rate for Chaz shekels? Okay, I get a message from YT. Okay, I'll get back to that later. Walrus Libertarian says, talk about a social experiment viewed in fast forward. MCT, rainy with liberal storms. Life on your end. Okay. Mike F says, as long as Raz's people aren't carrying tiki torches. That is a very good point. Again, from Professor Pohl, 5-year plan achieved in 2 days thanks to homeless stealing their food supplies. Okay. Brandon Smith says Raz already has a Wikipedia page depicting him as you might have guessed. What a great leader. A great leader. I cannot recite Raz's lyrics. In fact, I did not know that he was an up-and-coming rapper until, yesterday or maybe even this morning. Lady Antebellum. Antebellum, that's a word that should never, ever be mentioned. I'll be talking about that shortly. The second coming of Emperor Haile Selassie. Yeah, Raz Tafari. That was one of his names. And that's the origin of the completely insane Rastafarian movement. Walrus Libertarian says the fact that the tech companies aren't shutting this down tells you everything. Roy says Washington State lost $650 million to Nigerian internet crooks. Oh dear, how dumb they must be. General Butt Naked says Chogokin 666. Yeah, I'll talk about that a little later too. Mike F says, laugh now about intersectionality. In a few years, school children will be reciting oaths to it. Again, I see he has animal magnetism. Yes, perhaps he does. Perhaps he does. But, he does have the guns. That's generally how it works. Chogokin 666, reaching Liberia levels of absurdity. Well, I don't think we've seen the end of this yet. In fact, I am certain of it. Oh, one last thing about General Field Marshal Raz. William Briggs, pivoting from his COVID-19 studies, writes today, insurrectionists in Seattle have created an autonomous zone. Many laugh about this. They shouldn't. The sniveling fools in official charge of that city, those that are not actively complicit in the insurrection, that is, surrendered instantly. The governor, in the most brazen lie of a politician to date, claimed he hadn't even heard of the insurrection. The mayor had porta potties brought in so that if they could, the outlaws would have somewhere to drop what remains of their souls. And where will they be emptied? Where will the tanks be emptied? I was reading about them collecting garbage. Well, what are they going to do with their garbage? Are they going to incinerate it? Or they were just going to dump it over the wall that they have built? It's only if, because not much physically is left of them, they ran out of food at once, whining that the homeless ate their supply and put out a call for soy. That's not a tease. They wanted soy, not meat. They already have a warlord. Will know he's serious if he eats his enemies' livers. Don't scoff. His enforcer looks mean and hungry enough. The insurrectionists put up a wall as a first order of business. Boomer jokes arose. Oh, so they do support a wall. I say that we reinforce the wall, but quick, with concrete and razor wire, and allow no one out, lest the infection spread. Yes, I responded to Mayor Durkin of Seattle, saying that you'll be laughing out of the other side of your face when the Chaz cholera epidemic sweeps over Seattle. The past is being rewritten in real time, not just in the disunited states, but worldwide. The Confederacy is being treated as if it was an evil foreign invader. Nascar barred Confederate battle flags from their events. I tell you not to support them or any other entertainment complex, because support only feeds the beast that hates you, but you won't listen. An unimpeachable majority prefer entertainment over freedom. Incidentally, to the remnant who still cares, if you think you own non-physical digital media, you do not. You license it. If you want to keep what you have, you must acquire physical copies. University librarians, pay attention, are pushing against archive. The Wayback Machine will disappear soon enough. Do not count on finding what you want online. Yeah, and just to anyone who owns Apple products, I have some news from you. Maybe news to you. You don't own Apple products. You are allowed to use them under certain conditions. And if you violate those conditions, Apple will turn what you thought you owned into a brick. So a word to the wise there. Okay, Cringe Fest ahoy. From NBC News, nation's top military officer apologizes for role in Trump photo op outside church. I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. Milley said this. Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So as a commissioned uniformed officer, he said in a pre-taped announcement, it was a mistake that I have learned from, and I sincerely hope we can all learn from it. We who wear the cloth of our nation come from the people of our nation, and we must hold dear the principle of an apolitical military that is so deeply rooted in the very essence of our republic. And this is not easy. It takes time and work and effort, but it may be the single most important thing each and every one of us does every single day. So I guess that Milley has lined himself up with those generals who are at least amenable to a coup d'etat against Donald Trump. Matthew Iglesias is wearing a face diaper. This picture on Twitter. Trump tweeted, 10 hours ago, our great National Guard troops who took care of the area around the White House could hardly believe how easy it was. A walk in the park, one said. The protesters, agitators, anarchists, Antifa, and others were handled very easily by Guard, DC police, and SS. Great job. Now the SS is obviously referring to the Secret Service. Iglesias, a very witty man, responded, I think the U.S. Secret Service tries not to go by SS as an acronym, and all the well actually types are on Twitter saying it's USS. Nobody calls it, nobody abbreviates it SS. Well, I discovered some pretty shocking news today. I mean, hold on to your hat here, people. I learned today that since 1961, General Motors has offered Chevrolet owners an option package in honor of Hitler's genocidal Schutzstaffel, or SS. I am literally shaking right now. Your silence about this war crime speaks volumes, Matt Iglesias. Oh, I got into a dispute about people resigning. You know, George Clooney's character in Burn After Reading says, and he's in a position to know, most of the people in this town, referring to Washington, D.C., who say they resigned, were actually fired. I thought every adult knew that. From media, Nigel Farage resigns from radio show after comparing statue destroyers to Taliban. Yes. It was said, yes, here is from LBC, which is a radio station in London, a major one. A tweet, Nigel Farage's contract with LBC is up very shortly, and following discussions with him, Nigel is stepping down from LBC with immediate effect. We thank Nigel for the enormous contribution he has made to LBC and wish him well. Yeah, according to The Guardian, Farage's LBC producer revealed that the Brexit leader learned the news of his own resignation on social media. These people are such cowards that they can't even say that we fired someone. Because I don't know, is there too much testosterone in such a statement? Is it too macho for these people? There's a similar thing, with Don Cherry in Canada last year? Oh, that he had resigned? No, he hadn't resigned. He was fired. Apparently, LBC decided that Nigel Farage was toxic, so they fired him. Well, shouldn't that be the sort of thing that you boast of if you think that he's toxic? Though LBC did not reveal the reason for his departure, Sky News reported that LBC has come under fire for their employment of Farage, given his criticism of Black Lives Matter and the destruction of statues by George Floyd protesters. After clashing with Good Morning Britain's Piers Moron over Black Lives Matter this week, Farage declared, quote, Black Lives Matter is a far-left Marxist organization that wants to abolish the police and dismantle capitalism. This won't change just because 4 other panelists tried to shout down the truth on GMB this morning, unquote. The Guardian also responded that sources of the station pointed to internal fury over his comments earlier this week comparing protesters who destroyed the statue of Edward Colston in Bristol to the Taliban. Farage's LBC colleague James O'Brien appeared to celebrate the resignation on Thursday, tweeting, "We got our station back." Well, I checked for the tweet, and he is deleted it. Brave, brave man, James O'Brien. Of course, you will remember the Taliban was roundly excoriated in the West for pulling down ancient Buddhist statues. Now, the Buddhists, we in the West often get the impression that Buddhists are weak-willed and effeminate. I suspect that most Westerners, they think of Tibetan Buddhism, but the Buddhists in Vietnam and Burma, and certainly in Sri Lanka, they are a fierce people. And so to tear down all of our statues of the past, well, no, that's a good thing, because those are bad people. And yes. Oh, I see Professor Kate Williams tweets on Tuesday, Nigel Farage made the disgraceful comparison of Black Lives Matter to the Taliban on GMB. Horrible spreading of race hatred and inciting hate. Now he is stepping down from LBC immediate effect. This is long overdue. Race hatred must be off all the airwaves now. Kate Williams is a white woman. Dr. Sholomos Shagbaminu, who is obviously not a white woman, tweeted Nigel Farage is out of LBC. Couldn't have happened to a nicer person. We thank him for nothing. Well, people with names like that have thanked Britain for nothing, despite Britain very foolishly allowing these people to escape from their shithole countries. But no good deed goes unpunished, as they say. There's a Cornell professor named William Jacobson. He runs a website called Legal Insurrection, which I've seen many times in the past and has been quite useful. Now he's in big trouble. He writes, there is an effort underway to get me fired at Cornell Law School, where I've worked since November 2007, or if not fired, at least denounced publicly by the school. Ever since I started Legal Insurrection in October 2008, it's been an awkward relationship given the overwhelmingly liberal faculty and atmosphere. Living as a conservative on a liberal campus is like being the mouse waiting for the cat to pounce. For over 12 years, the Cornell cat did not pounce, though there were frequent and aggressive attempts by outsiders to get me fired, including threats and harassment. It always came off campus. I made great efforts to keep this website separate from my work. I did not write about Cornell that frequently and rarely about the law school itself. Nevertheless, the website and my political views were the elephant in the room. To the best of my knowledge, there is now an effort from inside the Cornell community to get me fired. The impetus for the effort was 2 posts I wrote at Legal Insurrection regarding the history and tactics of the Black Lives Matter movement. June 4th, 2020. Reminder, Hands Up, Don't Shoot is a fabricated narrative from the Michael Brown case, and from June 3rd, the bloodletting and wilding is part of an agenda to tear down the country. Those posts accurately detail the history of how the Black Lives Matter movement started and the agenda of the founders, which is playing out in the cultural purge and rioting taking place now. I saw that, first I want to say, with regard to Nigel Farage, this race hatred, have you ever wondered why the graphic that's attached to the hashtag Black Lives Matter is a paw print? Doesn't that seem kind of racist to you? Seems kind of racist to me. I mean, what are they implying? I saw a conversation that involved Edward Luttwak, a man I greatly admire, certainly one of the cleverest men alive, about the sacking of the universities. And he was suggesting the possibility of, actual universities being founded that would teach young people things. And he thought that there would be quite a demand for that. But there was an argument about, why do people go to university in the first place? Well, obviously, people who go to Ivy League schools or schools like Stanford, MIT, and University of Chicago, perhaps, well, it's a credential above all. That's why there is such fierce competition to get into these places. Okay, St. Louis Fox Theater apologizes and removes marquee in honor of slain retired officer David Dorn. Yes, who is a black man. He was murdered last week outside of Lee's Pawn and Jewelry in North St. Louis City. The looters then broke in the store and looted it as dozens of cars drove on by Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. He was 77 years old when he was gunned down by the looters. He lay outside the store bleeding as his death was captured on Facebook Live. On Sunday, St. Louis police arrested and charged 24-year-old Stefan Cannon with first-degree murder. Cannon once received a 7-year sentence, but didn't serve a day in prison. The fabulous Fox Theater in St. Louis ran a marquee in remembrance of retired police captain Dorn after his death. The theater is a St. Louis landmark. It was built in 1929. The theater included a Black Lives Matter in the marquee. So you know what happened next. The fabulous Fox removed the marquee and apologized for including Blue Lives Matter in their message. Well, you don't want to. Who's the broadcaster? Colin. He has a last Irish name. Don't Get the Black Kids Angry. That was the title of one of his books. Even more dangerous to get Black Lives Matter angry. So we had a rebellion at the New York Times of 400 young and sensitive wokesters. They were just beside themselves that the New York Times ran an op-ed by a U.S. senator. But apparently, according to Bloomberg, Zuckerberg's Trump decision sparks an internal Facebook rebellion. Again, I would really appreciate it if Zuckerberg were to tell these people, we're not holding you here at gunpoint. If you want to leave, by all means, leave. Good luck finding another job in this climate. From what I've read about Facebook and all these tech giants, they have hundreds or thousands of surplus employees, many of them hired for diversity or woke points. Got to have your transsexuals in there for some reason. And from what I've read from various sources is what these people do at these companies is they just send texts and emails back and forth demanding this, that, or the other, or complaining about the lack of intersectionality at their own company and at others. Oh, wow. This is a really intersectional story, and it's also a Canadian story as well. Megan Mertz's best friend forever, Jessica Mulrooney, says being the royals' closest friend has deeply educated her about race after she apologizes after white privilege row with a black influencer. Now, I should mention that Jessica Mulrooney is, let's see, according to Wikipedia, she was born Jessica Brownstein in 1980. She's a Canadian fashion stylist who regularly does segments for the television shows Good Morning America and City Line. She is married to Ben Mulrooney, who is the, look up his picture on Twitter. No one in history has ever had skin tone like that. He is the seriously robotic reality show host and gossip show host, who is the oldest child of Brian Mulroney, who was for 9 years Prime Minister of Canada, and one of whose daughters is now in the Ontario cabinet. So apparently, despite being Megan Mertz's BFF, the accusation from the Daily Mail, in an emotional video posted on her Instagram page, Sasha Exeter from Toronto claimed Jessica, 40, had taken offense to a very generic call to action posted online, and the two women argued about the importance of speaking up. Sasha said that she felt Jessica threatened her during the argument, claiming the mother of three had written to her, quote, "I have also spoken to companies and people about the way you have treated me unfairly. You think your voice matters? Well, it only matters if you express it with kindness and without shaming people who are simply trying to learn. Good luck." In a comment posted on the video clip, Jessica said she was unequivocally sorry, writing, "As I told you privately, I've lived a very public and personal experience with my closest friend where race was front and center. I can't be a racist because I have a half-black friend." This is too funny. Now, of course, the influencers, it's the bonfire of the influencers. Some low-level employee simply has to say, I was subjected to racist behavior, and poof, your boss is gone. I suppose that would mean that your job is gone as well, but that's a small price to pay. There is a fire raging through the reality show universe, and my level of schadenfreude has reached a historic high. I mentioned a few weeks ago that there seems to be some sort of campaign to get rid of Ellen DeGeneres, who, of course, is America's favorite lesbian. Now, she's in trouble now for reasons I don't know. I follow this stuff pretty closely, but it's slipping away from me. Again, from the Mail. Ellen DeGeneres deletes tweet referring to people of color after receiving backlash for not referring to black people. There used to be a phrase decades ago that was quite common. And so, it was decided that the word Negro was unacceptable. So then colored people began to be used. Negro simply comes from the Spanish for black. I don't know why it could possibly be considered offensive, but never mind. So you had colored people. And then it was decided that that phrase was grossly offensive, and it was replaced with Afro-Americans. And mysteriously, some years later, Afro-American was changed to African-American. But, the word black and often people of color, they're used interchangeably. Now, how it could be that colored people is offensive, but people of color is not offensive. Let's see. Social media users flocked to Twitter to point out her message was tone deaf and hypocritical, as many pointed to her controversial friendship with George W. Bush. "Like many of you, I am angry and I'm sad," she wrote. "People of color in this country have faced injustice for far too long. For things to change, things must change. We must commit ourselves to this change with conviction and love." Many questioned her decision to shy away from specifically addressing the black community, with one of her followers firing, "Not people of color. George Floyd was black." Why being so cautious? Seriously? Yes, but by definition, George Floyd was black or African American, but also a person of color. Another chimed in, I still find it funny how Ellen DeGeneres, a woman who is famous for boastfully signing life-size checks to random people on her show, can't even post a screenshot on the internet of her donating money in support of Black lives. I mean, it's clear that she must be replaced by a Black, not a POC, lesbian. I don't know. Gayle King. I guess Gayle King has her hands full, but there are others. Okay, so I don't listen to their music, but I have heard of this group. The Grammy-winning best-selling country trio known as Lady Antebellum is no more. Now it's just Lady A. Antebellum comes from the Latin phrase status quo ante-bellum, which means how things were before the war. And pre-1965, the South, pre-1965, is often referred to as antebellum South. And I don't think that there's very many Black people who know or care about this, but in any event, they have renamed themselves Lady A. Because if you offend just one Black person, that is one too many, my friends. Those are words to live by. I responded, why didn't they just go whole hog and rename themselves Please Forgive Our Sins, Noble Black People? David Pinson had some very good suggestions. He said so many better options. Lady Rosa Parks, Lady Hidden Figures, or Lady Floyd. And I believe that we have a handy compendium. It's been superseded, though. It's a day old. This is from the Daily Beast. Everybody who's been fired during the racism reckoning of 2020. Is that what we're calling it, the racism reckoning? Greg Glassman, founder and CEO of CrossFit, for talking about Floyd 19. We've talked about that. Wendy Mesley from the CBC. We've talked about that. Stassi Schrader, Kristen Doubt, Max Boyens, and Brett Caprioni from Vanderpump Rules. We've talked about that. Apparently, there are other people under fire at Vanderpump Rules. Adam Rappaport, the editor-in-chief of Bon Appetit. Yeah. Oh my God. He wore Puerto Rican brown face taken at a costume party at 2013. Kristan Barbarich, top editor and co-founder of Refinery 29. They apparently discrimination at the Vice-owned fashion outlet. She stepped down, yes, as they say. One of the writers, Ashley Ford, wrote on Twitter, I worked at Refinery 29 for less than 9 months due to a toxic company culture where white women's egos ruled the near non-existent editorial processes. One of the founders consistently confused myself and one of our 4-time desk associates, and pay disparity was atrocious. Of course, I've had a lot of jobs in my life, and many of them I thought were toxic working places, and I've had bosses who I thought were insane or wicked. But of course, and I'm sure many of you listening can say the same. But of course, it's not relevant unless there is race involved. Hartley Sawyer, actor in The Flash, he has been canceled. He made a few jokes on the internet a few years ago. James Bennett, editorial page editor of the New York Times. And yeah, I'll get to him later. Stan Wisnowski, top editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer, for publishing a piece that said buildings matter too. Alexander Katai, midfielder on the LA Galaxy soccer team. Apparently, his wife, Taya, had shared memes mocking the past week's protests. And he then, after apologizing, he threw his wife under the bus. Andrew Alexander, CEO of Second City, I've known about Andrea Alexander since the 1970s because of SCTV, the TV show. I don't know, maybe certainly one of the top 5 best television shows ever. He was responsible for it. And he has apologized, but he's out anyway. The Second City cannot begin to call itself anti-racist, he wrote. That is one of the great failures of my life. The outcry came after Second City tweeted in support of BLM May 31st, prompting bemused and outraged posts from Black comedians who had endured discrimination while performing there. Yeah, Space Force writer Asian Lachey, is that the real name? Claimed that after reporting an assault from a white cast member, they told her she had to find a way to still perform with him. I'm sure that happened. I'm sure that happened. Holy Land CEO's daughter, Leanne Waddy. She's the catering director at Holy Land. Well, we're really going down the food chain here. Racial slurs on social media. She apologized, saying she was deeply mortified and disgusted by the comments which she made as a teenager. Okay, apparently she had disparaged Black, Jewish, fat, and gay people. Kimberly Ray and Barry Beck, radio hosts on Radio 95.1 FM, owned by iHeartMedia. Oh, iHeartMedia. Isn't that cute? Isn't that cuddly? They used to be called Clear Channel, and they're evil. The duo had aired a discussion about a conflict between protesters and 2 counter-protesters that resulted in the assault of a local woman. And apparently, well, the N-word wasn't used, but words that were N-word adjacent were used. Craig Gore, TV writer on NBC's Law and Order, Organized Crime, he was fired after threatening violence against protesters on social media. Sunset is being looted 2 blocks from me, he wrote. You think I won't light MFers up who are trying to F with my property I worked all my life for? Think again. Grant Napier, Sacramento Kings TV broadcaster for KTHK Sports. We talked about him. He said all lives matter. He got fired for that. Oh, yes. And Amy Cooper was fired from financial firm Franklin Templeton because she got into a contretemps with a Black man, a gay activist who was bird watching in Central Park because her dog was not on the leash, and the man remonstrated with her, and he brought some dog treats out of his pocket with the suggestion that he was going to kidnap her dog, and that at one point he said, you do what you have to do, and I'll do what I have to do, which she took to be, not unreasonably, a threat. She called the police. I don't know. Was that really necessary? But the point is that her life has been ruined because she offended a Black man. There's no excuse for that. No, not just Black men, Black women, Black gender liquid, anything that could be construed as Black. From the Daily Mail, the racial profiling was sickening. Former Anthropology employees revealed the brand used a code word to identify Black customers and told staff to watch them closely in stores. The code name was Nick. And of course, they, to support Black Lives Matter, they sent out a message, presumably on Instagram, which quoted Maya Angelou, the world's worst poet. We all should know that diversity makes for a rich tapestry, and we must understand that all the threads of the tapestry are equal in value, no matter what their color. It doesn't sound very BLM friendly, but you see, a whole bunch of these companies have been busted after conspicuously sucking up to Black Lives Matter, and there is a lesson in that. CTV News takes a global look at a particular aspect of the Black Intifada as statues and monuments of leaders from bygone eras are being toppled in response to growing calls to end systemic racism and discrimination. The sentiment is also growing here in Canada. Note that there's no explanation of what systemic racism is. And note that none of these stories about Canada mention the fact that there is, in fact, systemic official racism in Canada. That is to say, discrimination against white people, because we have affirmative action in Canada since 1986, which was brought in by the aforesaid Brian Mulroney, that radical right winger. This discrimination against white people is actually written into our Constitution. Sounds crazy, right? But it's true. Okay, so protesters in Belgium vandalized a statue of King Leopold II. At Oxford University, there are calls to remove a statue of Cecil Rhodes. He's obviously behind the Rhodes Scholarships, and scholarship takes these young men and women to Oxford. In Bristol, England, a statue of slave trader Edward Colston was dragged through the streets and dumped into the harbor. Confederate generals, let's see, Canada is not immune to this. We were kind of ahead of the curve on this. A Change.org petition calling for the removal of a Sir John A. Macdonald statue in Montreal has received more than 10,000 signatures. Macdonald, Canada's first prime minister, was an architect of the residential school system and led starvation tactics against Indigenous people in the prairies. I'd like more details on that, actually. That's a really wild claim. I just say that that the reserve system in Canada was a sincere attempt by Canada's leaders at the time to preserve Indian culture, because they feared that without it, that Indian culture would entirely disappear, which was very likely to be true. I'm not going to go into the whole residential school thing. It's too big a subject for this program, at least at this time. And, David MacDonald, a political science professor at the University of Guelph, says MacDonald certainly was the architect of several genocides in Canada. Oh, not just one, but several genocides. Okay. If you compare the treatment of Indians in Canada, to the treatment of them in the United States, it's like chalk and cheese. There was nothing like the Trail of Tears in Canada, but again, that doesn't matter to Canada's Indigenous people, as we're supposed to call them, and their allies. Petitions in Toronto are calling for the city to rename Dundas Street, which is named after Henry Dundas, who delayed the abolition of slavery in the British Empire, and for Ryerson University to take down its statue of the school's founder, Egerton Ryerson, who also helped develop the residential schools. Let's see, a monument to Edward Cornwallis, the city's founder in Halifax, was removed in 2018. James McGill, as in McGill University. And Sir Wilfrid Laurier. I guess they're going to be canceled as well. Jefferson Davis Monument torn down by protesters in Richmond, Virginia. I have quite a fondness for Jeff Davis myself. And some, here's a lighthearted story. Confederate statue toppled by protesters crashes down on man in Virginia, video shows. He was severely injured, I believe elsewhere that he was said to be in critical condition. Portsmouth Police Department asked demonstrators to disperse and bystanders to clear the area in a tweet after 10 p.m. while officers investigated an incident that resulted in a citizen getting injured. If you watch the video, you see a bunch of idiots who are standing directly in front of a statue which is about to be toppled. Black Lives Matter 757 identified the man Thursday as Chris Green, a member of the 757 community. 757, is that an area code? Because I don't know what that means. When the statue finally did give way, it came and fully hit him in the head. Well, what do you know? The South will rise again. Angela Rye of CNN, who looks like a charming person, she's called for statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson to come down. American history is not all glorious. George Washington was a slave owner, We need to call slave owners out for what they are. Whatever we think they were protecting American freedom or not, he wasn't protecting my freedoms. You weren't alive, lady. I don't know when you think that George Washington actually lived. I suspect that Angela Rye's knowledge of George Washington is rather simple. One, slave owner, and as they said in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, dollar bill guy. Born on President's Day. Okay, there's a fact number 3. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, aka the Great Emancipator, this is from the Gateway Pundit, signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, freeing the slaves. But never mind all that boring history stuff. Protesters in Chicago on Wednesday decided the 13th president doesn't believe Black Lives Matter and defaced a statue of him. Oh, we had heard from Alderman Raymond Lopez and his dispute with the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. Ugh. What an absolute disgraceful act of vandalism. This bust of Abraham Lincoln, erected by Phil Bloomquist in 1926, was damaged and burned, Lopez wrote. If anyone has any information regarding this act, please contact the police or my office. The giant bust appeared to have been sprayed with a flammable liquid and ignited. Maybe we should just, cut to the chase here and just rename everything in America after Tupac Shakur. I think that would do it. Don't you think? Although, Tupac Shakur Boulevard might be even scarier than Martin Luther King Boulevard. Let's go back to the chat briefly. David Wright says, my niece waited on Tiger Woods, no tip. I understand a lot of rich people are like that, but I've never understood it. I've never understood it because, if I had that kind of money, or it wouldn't even have to be anywhere near close to that money, I could, pat myself on the back and feel good about myself because I was giving waitresses 20, 25% tips. It's just a few bucks out of your pocket. It makes the waiter or waitress feel good and it makes you feel good. So why wouldn't you do it? Manfred van Thistlebaum says, yes, I waited tables in fine dining and everyone of that class tips well. Black pro athletes. Okay, yeah, this is a meme that's a decade old or so saying that Black people are bad tippers and that Black church groups are the worst of all, perhaps. But apparently Black sports stars are good tippers. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Okay, I don't know how much Tiger Woods is Asian, Jonathan Paul. Yeah, of course, I guess, Americans, Canadians think of him as being Black, but there was a exceedingly amusing episode of King of the Hill where there was a Asian country club, and they didn't have any white members, and they wanted to be eligible for a PGA tournament, so they had to have at least one member, and so there was a raffle, and it was decided that Hank Hill was going to be that white member, and he got suspicious about this. They were offering him membership in the club and free membership and all this stuff, and he got suspicious, and he opened up the box with the so-called raffle tickets. Is like Hank Hill, and a whole bunch of them simply read the white guy. Don't forget about him chopping down that cherry tree, William Hicks. Of course, there's a famous portrait of that from the same fellow who painted American Gothic. Oh, lots of Mexicans and Native Americans in Arizona, says Professor Paul. Not many Blacks or Asians. MCT gonna leave a big hole when they blow up Stone Mountain. Yeah, well, I know they've been after Stone Mountain for a long, long time. I don't know. I guess they'll just, use enough dynamite to do it. Perhaps a small tactical nuclear explosion would do the trick. Chogakin666 says Lou Reed never tipped. I was a big fan of Lou Reed, his work with the Velvet Underground. But, I just had to admit, and I learned this a long time ago, that Lou Reed was a spectacularly nasty man. William Hicks says Tupac International Airport, Tupac Stock Exchange, Tupac Central Station. Tupac Central Station. That sounds like a 70s funk outfit, doesn't it? Wasn't there there was one called Graham Central Station, Larry Graham, the bass player. Okay. All right. Let's get back into it here. Donald Trump rejects Republicans stripping Confederates' names from Army bases, despite his party already voting for move pushed by Elizabeth Warren. Okay, we got two things going on. We have the 11 Confederates statues that are in the Capitol that Nancy Pelosi is screeching must be removed. Nancy Pelosi has been in Congress, since shortly after the Civil War? And now these statues enrage her. I mean, this is a question that all these people should be asked. You've known about this. You've lived with it for a long time, maybe decades. Why now are you pretending that you are absolutely infuriated by this? Why now? It's not very persuasive. Seriously failed presidential candidate Senator Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren just introduced an amendment on the renaming of many of our legendary military bases from which we trained to win 2 world wars. Trump tweeted, "Hopefully our great Republican senators won't fall for this." The president was late by nearly a day as Republican senators in the Armed Services Committee voted Wednesday night in the affirmative for the amendment, according to roll call. It gives the military 3 years to rename bases and other entities currently using names to the Confederacy. Okay, well, Fort Tupac. Columbus. Statues of him are being decapitated, removed everywhere. And I joked the other day that Columbus, Ohio, was going to be renamed Lil Bow Wow City. Lil Bow Wow being Columbus's finest musical product. The vote was taken behind closed doors and was a voice vote. Cowardly. The act must still be approved by the full Senate and also by the House. In committee, just one Republican would have needed to vote with Democrats to approve the amendment, but the absence of a roll call vote suggests many more did. The vote came hours after Trump tweeted furiously that he will not even consider renaming Forts Bragg, Hood, Lee, and others. Now, the press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, very, very, very impressive woman. The Daily Mail explains the 10 bases are named for a group that includes slave owners, officers who left the U.S. Army to join the rebels, and at least one general who ordered the execution of unarmed prisoners. Oh, they want to get into that subject? War atrocities during the Civil War? There's plenty to go around on both sides. And Elizabeth Warren, of course, is wearing a face diaper. I mean, you wouldn't expect any different. I see that Senator Cotton is not wearing a face diaper. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, California Republican, said Thursday he's not opposed to a line in the defense appropriations bill making its way through Congress that would compel the military to rename bases. Okay. With regard to Nancy Pelosi's demand that these 11 statues of Confederate worthies be removed, I think that she's right. There's no place in Congress for men of courage and integrity. NASCAR Truck Series driver to quit over Confederate flag ban. Ray Ciccarelli wrote on his Facebook page Wednesday that it's been a fun ride and dream come true, but if this is the direction NASCAR is headed, we will not participate after 2020 season is over. Ciccarelli accused the organization of taking sides politically against its own fans. I don't believe in kneeling during anthem, nor taking people's right to fly whatever flag they love. I could care less about the Confederate flag, but there are people that do, and it doesn't make them a racist. All you are doing is expletive one group to cater to another, to participate in any political BS. So everything is for sale. NASCAR helmet artist Jason Beam also described the decision as ignorance wins again. Okay, so William Briggs said that Americans are not going to abandon a sports ball or NASCAR simply because these people, the people who run these businesses, hate you and want you replaced. They don't have to be abandoned. These businesses run on margins. Now, I'm just wondering how these sports leagues can actually pay the salaries that they're contractually obligated to, given that basketball was suspended months ago, that baseball traditionally starts around April the 1st, and it is now June the 11th, and we haven't had any baseball. If a significant portion, if 20 or perhaps even 10% of fans drop out, that is to say, they don't go to the games, they don't buy the merch, they don't watch on TV, these leagues are going to be in serious trouble. The Charlotte Observer reports NASCAR bans Confederate flag from all events. How are fans taking it? Well, the New York Socialist says NASCAR made the right call. Ethan Ambrose said, good. Pretty sure they don't allow Nazi flags at German sporting events. We shouldn't allow Confederate flags at U.S. sporting events. That's supposed to be the QED, Nazi. Okay, I suppose Ethan Ambrose, whoever he might be, doesn't understand how infuriating this is to a great many people in his country, but he doesn't care about those people. Esther Gonzalez approves, as does Pete Pistone. Oh, yes, and they have also embraced an inclusiveness initiative with the alphabet people community. A lot of gay black NASCAR fans. At least that's what I've heard. Tennessee Patriot said, good luck with that. I'll be bringing mine Confederate flag to every race. Glenn Starrick says, and they allow the protest during the national anthem to this son of a vet, this father of a vet, and a vet. NASCAR has gone too far for me. And the Volatile Mermaid. I guess all of the attendees will be naked now. Stop it. You're killing me. And of course, Bubba, I've forgotten his last name, the black NASCAR driver, there's only one, is going to be racing in a Black Lives Matter Chevy. I'm sure that will become an instant fan favorite. Well, it'll become an instant media favorite. No question about it. There's a piece in Spiked by Ken McLaughlin called The Perils of Being Perpetually Offended. He writes, you couldn't make it up. An event called An Evening with Canceled People was due to feature a number of women who had been disinvited from public engagements due to objections from people who disagree with their viewpoints. But it was itself canceled due to objections from people who disagree with their viewpoints. I laughed at the irony, though I was dismayed at my lack of surprise. Unfortunately, no platforming has become an all-too-common tactic employed by many of today's politicos when confronted with ideas they disagree with. Yeah, I don't know. I've been hearing this for, 20 years? 30 years, in fact. The loss of free speech, first on campuses and everywhere else, and I don't know what's being done. What's being done about it? Not a lot that I can see. This is such an old story to me. But one of the things I found interesting in this piece was a look through the archives can be a shocking reminder of how bad things were and how thankfully they have changed for the better. For instance, in 1988, the government introduced Section 28 a clause added to the Local Government Act which prohibited the intentional promotion of homosexuality in schools. So 1988, okay, that's 32 years ago. That gives you an idea how quickly and how far things have moved. The previous year, that is to say that it was a popular decision. No, we do not proselytize for homosexuality in schools. Now, of course, it is demanded of all politicians that they approve of this starting at age 5 with graphic descriptions of acts I'm not going to mention here because they're so disgusting. The previous year, James Anderton, then Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, speaking at a national police conference, said, "Everywhere I go, I see evidence of people swirling around in the cesspool of their own making." He was talking about homosexuality at the height of the AIDS panic. Anderton's police force was infamous for its intimidation and harassment of Manchester's gay community. While his comments did generate some criticism, even from within the police force, the press mostly supported him. But you see, the police in Britain and in many places in America and Canada is now completely paused. I know that a lot of people feel a loyalty to the police and Blue Lives Matter and all that, but I don't know. Depending on where you live, the police may dislike you just as much as Black Lives Matter does. Oh, I'm looking at the rather fearsome face of Sarah Paulson, who's an actress and a lesbian. And she made a video for the NAACP with a bunch of other celebrities. I take responsibility, for her own racism. Quote, "The entire country has reached its limit and we cannot allow one more Black person to die at the hands of government." I guess we're going to have some sort of dictatorship then. I mean, what if a Black person was to die accidentally at the hands of government, even after, BLM set up its dictatorship? What would happen then? I guess there'd have to be purges. And I very much would be looking forward to that. In that regard, I'll just mention a story you probably heard me say before. But there was a Hungarian called Tibor Shmuley. And that was a famous name in Hungarian communist circles. He hated communism. He was a defector. He moved to England and became friends with people such as Kingsley Amis and Robert Conquest, John Brain, the novelist. And he wrote a book about communism. And he was once asked by an interviewer who was his favorite Russian leader, of course, Russia being conflated with the Soviet Union. And he said Stalin. And the interviewer was quite visibly taken back. And she said, "Why?" And Shmuley said, "Because he killed more communists than anyone." Anyway, Sarah Paulson, she's wearing these oversized problem glasses, and she seriously looks like an old-style teacher who would whack kids on the hand with a ruler and then smirk evilly. Alternatively, she is getting ready for her role as Nurse Ratched in the remake of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, in which the Jack Nicholson character will, of course, be a non-binary person of color. So you have all of these famous people groveling, but I just don't, that's not enough. It's just not enough. Words are cheap, as they say. And I want more from these people. What I want is for Sarah Paulson to retire from acting. I want all white actors, male, female, or gender liquid, to retire. And so it can all be Black people, and at least non-white people. We've had enough white stories. It should just be Black stories all the time. It's a form of, reparations, of justice for past systemic Racism. Someone suggested a slight alternative, which is for 5 years, it's just all black actors, except for the villains. They can still be played by white people. And yeah, okay. I get it. That makes sense. Oh, yeah. I suggested today that I'm counting down the minutes until college students claim that the phrase status quo antebellum is triggering and must be removed from all textbooks. I mean, seriously, I wouldn't be surprised. I've heard that a joke is being played on Ice Cube, that they know that he's both angry and not very bright. So outrageous memes are being sent to him, and he is reprinting them because he doesn't know when he's being trolled. What is this from the Daily Beast? Ice Cube spreads Russian propaganda and anti-Semitic conspiracy on Twitter. I talked about this a few days ago. Just when you thought 2020 couldn't get any weirder, rapper Ice Cube has shared a meme from a Russian propaganda website that claims Europeans shot the noses off of ancient Egyptian statues. The story goes on to explain the noses were broken because the pharaohs would break the noses of the statues of their predecessors. Late Wednesday afternoon, Ice Cube shared an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory on Twitter, posting an image of the black cube of Saturn within the Star of David. The black cube of Saturn refers to a cult of Satan worshippers. Wow. Intersectionality wars. I feel vindicated. I have been writing for years, that intersectionality is going to lead, sooner rather than later, to the war of all against all. Since I have no stake in the intersectionality wars, I cannot claim to be intersectional in any way. Not my fight. I hope these people destroy each other. The Independent of London, it used to be a serious newspaper. It's no longer a serious newspaper. I guess it's kind of a Guardian light now. All the idiocy of the Guardian without the very valuable arts coverage that the Guardian still provides. There's a piece in it, how Britain's colonial past can be traced through to the transphobic feminism of today. Much like imperialist classifications, rejecting the idea of more fluid sex seeks to violate anyone who doesn't conform. That use of that word violate in this context is really not appropriate. And this is written by I will just say a man. Okay, I'm gendering him. But his name is Amron El-Khadi. And he is a drag queen. There are many pictures of him on image search, and they are quite frightening. They're quite frightening. He writes, in the most significant anti-racism demonstrations in generations. Oh, okay. The chickens are finally coming home to roost after centuries of unbridled white supremacy. Again, I have to ask, if Britain is really run by white supremacists, how was it that Amron El-Khadi managed to end up there? That it's all happening against the backdrop of a global pandemic that has disproportionately killed BAME people is even more significant. Yet as the inequity of capitalism and its inextricable link to white privilege are brought into focus, J.K. Rowling instead devoted her enormous Twitter platform to discussing the use of gender-neutral terms last Saturday night. The timing of her social media tirade is telling in the context of a collective reckoning with how our economic, political, and social systems have dehumanized Black lives for centuries. Hey, pal, you, Amron, you are not Black. Your people took millions of Black people as slaves. But I'm not hearing any apologies for that. Curious, don't you think? Let's see. Dehumanized Black lives for century. It seemed the fantasy writer turned billionaire had decided an equally pressing issue was making grand claims about the estimated 1% of the population who identify as trans. No, she is not doing that. She is making a rather simple claim about women who do not identify as trans. That is to say that they are women. That these women, these cisgendered women, as they are called now, they are the only people who can menstruate and give birth. Now, those happen to be medical facts, but as we have learned, facts and knowledge are attributes of white supremacy. You see how perfect this is? As Ron Unz said some months ago, if you replace racism or white supremacy with voodoo or magic, it has the same effect. Because apparently white people are magical. They have this tremendous power called white supremacy. Meanwhile, Amron continues, transphobia is tethered to the malign structures of white supremacy. So as we harness this political moment to dismantle centuries of inherited racism, we also have a duty to understand its relationship with the kind of discourse that is, quite frankly, making life hell for trans people. Look, I could mention here that trans people, a great many of them, have already had significant mental health problems before any kind of transitioning or simply a declaration that they were now a different sex. You hear so much about the trauma of Black transsexual women in the United States. I have seen figures indicating that up to 45% of these people work as prostitutes. That is a dangerous and dispiriting job. Kpop. Let's talk about Kpop, because the BBC confirmed my conspiracy theory of yesterday. They've confirmed it. This is from Shreyas Reddy. K-pop fans emerge as a powerful force in U.S. protests. Well, how could that be? Amid ongoing protests in America against racism and police brutality, a global legion of K-pop fans has emerged as an important ally for the Black Lives Matter movement. Fans of South Korea's popular music industry have raised funds for BLM and mobilized to overload social media hashtags used by its opponents, earning appreciation from protesters for their political activism. Some may have been surprised by their impact, but K-pop observers note fans have long organized support for social and political causes, as well as their favorite artists. This support has, however, also raised questions about systemic racism in the industry and fandom, leading to calls for K-pop to address its own complicated relationship with race. Yes. I mean, surely the 14%, 13 or 14% of South Korea that is Black should be represented in their popular music, right? Following the outbreak of protests in the U.S. sparked by the death of Black man George Floyd, the Dallas Police Department asked people to share videos of illegal activity protests through their I Watch Dallas app. K-pop fans worldwide responded by inundating it with fan-recorded videos known as fan cams and memes of various K-pop artists in an effort to prevent police from tracking protesters' actions. K-pop fans have also spammed hashtags used to oppose BLM on social media, such as All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and White Lives Matter. Through this, such hashtags trend higher, but it also makes it harder for the original messages to be seen. K-pop fans who have previously been derided online and criticized for fan cam spam were celebrated as valued allies of the protesters. It's my understanding that this kind of behavior is clearly prohibited under Twitter's rules. Clearly prohibited. And I know that there have been people who have been permanently suspended. What, the Krasenstein brothers for spamming? So is Twitter going to take action against these K-pop fans? I should also say something about K-pop. The unfortunates who work in that industry are indentured servants. They're little better than slaves and sexual slaves, actually, a great many of them. There was a infamous case not that long ago of one of these young K-pop women who committed suicide. Ostensibly, she was being blackmailed, that she was forced into a sexual relationship with some Kpop bigwig, and there was a threat of a tape being released to the world. It's really an awful business, and I can't help but suspect that the reason that the K-poppers have got woke is because they are moving before their own wickedness is exposed. The wicked flee when none pursueth. I've been informed that apparently a large number of black women are K-pop fans. Okay. It seems odd to me. Let's see. Oh, okay. Okay. Now we get into the really stupid part of the show. The kind of thing that not that long ago I would have thought, no, I don't know. I must be imagining this, or I must be going crazy because this couldn't be happening. There's a woman, a young woman, a journalist. Her name is Amanda Hess. She is well known. I believe she used to write for Slate. She's written for many outlets. And now she is in the New York Times. This was yesterday. Let's see. The protests come for Paw Patrol. A backlash is mounting against depictions of good cops on television and in the street. Let's see. Chase is on the case in Paw Patrol, but as protests against racist police violence reach their third week, criticism of fictional cops is growing too. This is one of the most remarkable lead sentences that I have ever seen, and here it is. It was only a matter of time before the protests came for Paw Patrol. Yes, of course, because it's obviously fascist, right? Because it has a cartoon cop who's a pet, who's a cop. Cops are bad. It's fascist. Paw Patrol is a children's cartoon about a squad of canine helpers. It is basically a pretense for placing household pets in a variety of cool trucks. The team includes Marshall, a firefighting Dalmatian, Rubble, a bulldog construction worker, and Chase, a German Shepherd who is also a cop. In the world of Paw Patrol, Chase is drawn to be a very good boy who barks stuff like Chase is on the case, and all in a police pup's day as he rescues kittens in his tricked-out SUV. But last week, when the show's official Twitter account put out a bland call for black voices to be heard, big mistake. Commenters came after Chase. Euthanize the police dog, they said. Defund the Paw Patrol. All dogs go to heaven except the class traitors in the Paw Patrol. It's a joke, but it's also not. As the protests against racist police violence enter their third week, the charges are mounting against fictional cops too. Even big-hearted cartoon police dogs, or maybe especially big-hearted cartoon police dogs, are on notice. The effort to publicize police brutality also means banishing the good cop archetype, which reigns on both television and in viral videos of the protests themselves. Paw Patrol seems harmless enough, and that's the point. The movement rests on understanding that cops do plenty of harm. What was the good cop archetype? Ever since the movie of Joseph Wamba's novel, The New Centurions, came out, it has become a cliche that cops, well, especially American cops, are all head cases. And it's my belief that a large number of American cops in my country too have internalized this. That, I see The Wire has been criticized for its good cop archetype. Are there any good cops on that show? Are there any that weren't crooked, breaking the rules, hurting people, drunk every night, that sort of thing? I stopped watching cop shows a long time ago, but even back then, the cops were frequently seriously messed up. The protests arrived in the midst of a pandemic that has alienated Americans from their social ties, family lives, and workplaces. New and intense relationships with content have filled the gap. Yay, Netflix! I love you, Netflix! And now our quarantine consumptions are being reviewed with an urgently political eye. The reckoning has come for newspapers, food magazines, Bravo reality shows, and police procedurals. Yeah, I should mention that I said that Cops had been canceled. But the host of Live PD said that it was going to continue. Well, no, yesterday that got canceled too. That was the most popular show on American cable, and they canceled it. Okay, Monk. Apparently Monk is not real. Yeah. With this genius autistic police detective. Not real? Oh, come on. Why do you have to spoil everything? Oh, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Oh boy, that's been criticized too. Even on television, the good guys are not always so good. Modern cop shows make heroes out of people who violate our rights. I don't know. Vic Mackey violated a lot of people's rights on The Shield. He didn't seem to have any racial bias. One of the members of his squad certainly did. But is Vic Mackey supposed to be a hero? It'd be difficult, to say that outright. Of course, he was pretty good at bringing down the bad guys, but he was also corrupt to the core and a murderer. Okay, so yeah, we got to get rid of cop shows. What? Perry Mason and Matlock? Did anyone believe that Perry Mason and Matlock were anything close to reality? I grew up watching Perry Mason, and I thought, oh, so this is what trials are like. It turns out that I believe there was only in the entire history of the show Perry Mason, only one of the cases that he defended actually went to a verdict. Actually, went to jury. Typically on Perry Mason, there would be someone being examined or cross-examined, and then some man would fly up from the gallery, and he said, "I did it. I killed him. And I'd do it again. I couldn't stand the way he treated you, the way they all treated you. I love you, Myrna. I always have. Bailiff, remove that man. Release the..." That never happens. Never happens. But, TV is supposed to be all documentaries. Is that what it's supposed to be? Okay. Yes, the good cop trope is a standard of both police procedurals and real-life police tactics. And now crowdsourced video of the protests has given cops a new stage for performing that role. Really? I don't think so. Again, I'm thinking of the cops on the HBO show Barry, which I'm exceedingly fond of. There was a black cop on it who was quite good at her job and seemed like a good person. Her partner, a white man, a middle-aged white man, his wife left him for someone else after he had poured his life savings in a business, Quinceañera themed business that she wanted to open a store for this. So now he was broke and his wife had left him, and it drove him insane. And then he did a whole bunch of evil things. I'm just not getting this idea that cops are universally beloved on TV. Let's see, these images show cops engaging in a kind of pantomime of protest, mimicking the gestures of the demonstrators until their messages are diluted beyond recognition. You see, the cops are, when they are friendly with the protesters, dancing with them or whatever, see, they're appropriating their anger. They reframe protests against racist police violence to a bland, non-specific goal of solidarity. These moments are meant to represent the shared humanity between officers and protesters, but cops already rank among the most humanized groups in America. Humanized? Is that like racialized? The same cannot be said for the same Black Americans who live in fear of them. Cops can dance, they can hug, they can kneel on the ground, but their individual acts of kindness can no longer obscure the violence of a system. The good cop act is wearing thin. Okay, after this appeared, Twitter was full of idiots like Dr. Eugene Gu saying, "Don't you understand this is a joke? It's all a joke, that no one is against Paw Patrol." Well, okay, Amanda Hess is extremely serious about everything. If these people had managed to check out her oeuvre, they would have discovered that. And she is not the first. From CNN, December 22nd, 2017, Why Kids Love Fascist Cartoons Like Paw Patrol and Thomas by Alyssa Strauss. Fascist. Fascist, fascist, fascist. Thomas the Tank Engine, the long-running television franchise about a group of working trains chugging away on the island of Sodor, has been called a pre-modern corporate totalitarian dystopia in the New Yorker, imperialist and sinister in Slate, and classist, sexist, and anti-environmentalist in The Guardian. Paw Patrol is equally polarizing. BuzzFeed called the show terrible and pointed to instances of gender and social inequality that go unchecked on the show. In The Guardian, writer is described as a megalomaniac with an implied unstoppable God complex. Okay. Strauss is not the only one. Someone calling himself Walter D., who is a communist who writes mostly for Medium, The Misogyny and Authoritarianism of Paw Patrol. That's from December the 7th, 2018. Take a moment to consider what your kids are watching and how it will impact their future perception of authority, gender, and society. On the surface, Paw Patrol seems like harmless fun. However, the themes presented to the impressionable audience depict a misogynistic, conservative, authoritarian fantasy. The cartoon presents a world where it is common practice for police to track people with surveillance drones. Its depiction of gender dismisses women's position in the workplace and government. Finally, it builds a world where there are no social services, leaving citizens at the mercy of a private entity. In short, it is everything Trump's Republican Party is pushing on the United States. Now, I got into a Twitter argument with a couple of people yesterday because they kept saying it's a joke. It's a joke. And I said, it's not a joke, and I can prove it. And I did prove it. No, but don't you understand that it's a joke? Oh, no, it's tremendous exaggeration. No, it isn't, actually. In 2014, the same year the Paw Patrol writers equipped Chase with a drone, the Obama administration used drones to kill 1,147 people. It's funny, these things which start out as jokes end up being deadly serious. When divorce was made no fault, when divorce laws were, liberalized in the Western world in the 1960s, we were told there's not going to be an epidemic of divorce. There's not going to be all that many divorces, not many more than there are now. We're talking about terrible situations where women are beaten by their husbands, where their children have nothing to eat because the husband has spent it all on other women or alcohol or whatever. We're talking about the hard cases. When abortion was liberalized in the 1960s, oh, yeah, sure, everyone's just going to have an abortion. Women are going to have an abortion at the drop of a hat for no reason. Are you suggesting that abortion could be used as a form of birth control? That is absolutely outrageous. Abortion is a sacred decision made between a woman, her doctor, and her God, if she has one. We expect that abortions will remain rare. And then suddenly it was just a free-for-all, right? What was it, 20, 25 years ago? There was a prominent columnist from the Vancouver province, Lynn Coburn was her name, and she was writing about a story which had attracted attention where a woman, I guess in the Vancouver area, had explained that she was having an abortion because she would be big, heavy with child during swimsuit season, and she didn't want that. And Lynn Coburn said, yeah, what's wrong with that? What's wrong? Indeed, when the notion of gay marriage, as late as 1999 or 2000, the Reform Party in Canada forced a vote on gay marriage in the House of Commons, and the media and pretty much everyone's saying, oh, this is outrageous, as if anyone is demanding that gay marriage be legalized. And then 3 years later, an Ontario court ruled that gay marriage must be legalized, and that was the end of that. So when these people talk about jokes, they're not serious, okay? And again, I suppose I was foolish to get into an argument with these two people, but from time to time, I get sick of stupid, ignorant people flaunting their stupidity and their ignorance while claiming to authoritative knowledge of a subject. Okay, so this Manifest piece, there's been a huge backlash, which was reported by Fox News. Let's see. Dana Loesch, or Lash, is that pronounced? The rage mob is coming for Paw Patrol. One of these guys asked me yesterday, do you watch Paw Patrol? And I responded that I did not, because I'm not a woman. My children are all grown up, and I am not a pederast. So why would I watch Paw Patrol? And, oh, yeah, we're running out of time here. There was a very interesting thread by Baruch Kogan. I don't know if that's his real name. A lot of people are black-pilled about Trump's response or lack of response to the Black Intifada. He writes, Trump's options right now do nothing, let Antifa and BLM wreck blue cities, disband police, and alienate his opponents' constituents until they cry for federal takeover right before elections. Send in the troops, whose leaders have made it clear they're disloyal, risk a coup. Every mass event in modern America must be analyzed in terms of the reaction it's designed to provoke. I couldn't understand the St. George riots, which were supposed to have kicked off after the martyrdom of St. Ahmad. Natural reaction is martial law. Why would they want that? Now I understand. Trump was on his way to mobilizing the military to impose order, moved a brigade of the 82nd to a staging area, etc., when the generals and the Secretary of Defense tipped their hand. Had he gone ahead, Trump would have found himself the target of a coup. It was bait. By pulling back, he puts his enemies in an untenable situation. They can't go back, and they can't go forward, and they can't stay where they are. They must impose some sort of order or get eaten by their own pets. Meanwhile, Trump can quickly and quietly clean house, rebase on loyal elements, and then come back in at his leisure in time for elections. By the way, taking over these cities with federal police forces opens the opportunity of countering electoral fraud efficiency. By the way, this explains woke capital's mass coordinated support for the rioters. Obviously, they couldn't care less about St. George, but a coup would bring big dividends for the guys issuing their marching orders. And he says, want to get the opinion of Edward Litvak. Litvak, perhaps his most famous book is called Coup d'etat, a handbook, and that has my highest recommendation. A revised edition came out just a couple of years ago. I think that this fellow is, Baruch Kogan, is absolutely right about this. You know, sometimes you have to be patient. And the 24/7 news cycle and the internet has made us all impatient. It was only a couple of weeks ago that George Floyd was killed, and November is still months away. Trump, he thinks these out. He thinks before he acts. He's not given to reflexive decisions. He's certainly reflexive on Twitter, but that's just talk. This Raz Simone, as I said, he reminds me of General Field Marshal Senki Ntumbe, who died at the hands of the police in a house in Los Angeles in May 17th, 1974. There was a shootout between the LAPD and the Symbionese Liberation Army. They had automatic weapons. The revolutionaries did. Thousands of rounds were expended. And somebody mentioned, Kpop, someone like that, saying that things came apart in America in the 1960s, and then Charles Manson scared people straight. I think there's a great deal of truth to that. I watched the shootout on TV in 1974, and I could hardly believe that it was happening. Of course, the Patty Hearst story, the kidnapping and the bank robberies. Again, it seemed that everything was falling apart. So it's tempting to compare Black Lives Matter with the Symbionese Liberation Army because they're both crazy. But there's two big differences. One is that the members of the Symbionese Liberation Army were brave. They were willing to, and in quite a few cases did, give up their lives for their cause. Secondly, America was a much, much more stable country in 1974 than it was today. As an example of that, I will say there were only a handful of Americans at the time in 1974 who regarded the SLA as anything other than evil and insane. Joe Biden says his single greatest fear is that Donald Trump will try to steal the election and says military might have to escort him from the White House. You see that little dog whistle there? Talking about the military taking Donald Trump out of the White House. Boy, this is rising to a crescendo, isn't it? In other Joe Biden news from Gateway Pundit, old Joe loses his train of thought, stumbles through roundtable discussion with mask dangling from his ear. And he confused the Declaration of Independence with the Constitution, which a lot of people do. But of course, you remember that Joe Biden was just a star scholar, both at university and law school, top of his class. He was near the bottom of the class. Here is some very interesting political news. Harry Enton, forecaster Enton, tweets, Joe Biden looks like he's underperforming Hillary Clinton by double digits among Hispanic voters. He's basically holding with black voters and vastly outperforming with white voters. This could have significant implications for his electoral map strategy. In the final 2016 polls, Clinton took 83% of the black vote, 61% of the Hispanic vote, and 37% of the white vote. Trump took 5% of the black vote, 23% of the Hispanic vote, and 51% of the white vote. The average poll from April 2020 to June 2020 is Biden has 83% of black support, 58% of Hispanic support, 44% of white support. Trump has 8% of black support, 33% of Hispanic support, and 50% of white support. Now, again, there's no rainbow coalition. I guess, this anger against the phrase people of color, I guess I should have mentioned this before, but it just occurred to me, is evidence that the rainbow coalition is coming apart at the seams. We don't want to be lumped in with those others. We're black. Call us black. We don't like those other people. And blacks and Hispanics in the United States do not get along. And I have to think that watching 2 weeks of footage of black people with their Antifa buddies smashing up Hispanic neighborhoods and businesses in cities across the United States has infuriated a great many Hispanics who have decided to support Donald Trump, if only for the reason that it would annoy black people. We've got another model here saying 1,000 more Americans will die from coronavirus before September, double the current number, Harvard expert warns. Dr. Ashish Jha, director of the Harvard Global Health Institute. You see, they got a model, and these models have been so spectacularly successful so far. Yeah, he's got a model, and he's going to use it. Brian Resnick, who writes for Vox, he wrote a piece, 5 reasons the U.S. just can't give up on the pandemic. No, don't give up on the pandemic. Keep panic alive, Brian. Keep panic alive. They are really, standing for the spike. Come on, spike. Come on, what? This disease was supposed to get rid of Trump, and Trump is still there. We're beginning to doubt you, coronavirus. We had such high hopes in you, but you have seriously disappointed us. You better get your act together, and we better see this spike real soon now. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. Or Kanbak Sultanov says, all the Latinos I've engaged with say they hate BLM at all. Trotsky says Puerto Ricans hate blacks, so do Mexicans and Arabs. They'd have a race war even if whites weren't around. Lecomte de Brea says, I can see Trump bringing a Rolls-Royce wheelchair for Joe at the presidential debates. John Miller says, Yale people are weird. Stay away from them. My own personal advice is stay away from Rhodes Scholars. Okay? Something happened after World War II. It's like you come across, one of the worst people alive, and you look that person up on Wikipedia, invariably it says Rhodes Scholar. Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar, of course. The Rhodes Scholarship is supposed to include an athletic component. What could Bill Clinton's athletic component possibly have been? He was a fat boy. That guy would break a sweat walking down the block. It's a mystery to me. Okay. Wasn't lack of enthusiasm for Hillary a factor on 2016? I don't know that it was really all that significant. Did Biden really say you're not black if you're not looting? That's a good joke. No, he didn't quite say that. Mr. Dissident says based Latino police official called out Chicago mayor. John Miller says, did you see Biden's appearance today? He had 10 seconds of malfunctions. I find this guy funny, making fun of the coronavirus, but he's not in New York City like me, and in Queens, New York City, and people have died. My father died with coronavirus, okay? So don't lecture me. Okay. Mensa. Who's in Mensa? A dubious distinction? I think it's a dubious distinction to me because I'm going to join some club for extra smart people. I don't know, do you get discounts at various places if you're a Mensa member? But people actually advertising the fact that they're Mensa members, it just seems entirely untoward. Driss Doodoo says Bill Clinton's athletic performance was impregnating Hillary. Okay. Okay, that's the show for today. Sorry, there was no Theater Thursday, but we should have The Marriage of Maria Brown next Thursday. And there's no show tomorrow because I am moving. Thank God. I'm going to have a place to stay that is not a hotel. I've been in hotels for over 2 months now, and I pretty much reached my limit with it. So thank you all for listening. I will be back on the air Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already. If you would like to support this program with a donation, which would be very highly appreciated at this particular time, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Again, that is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. I will leave you with my now traditional benediction and farewell, which is that in these days of social isolation and societal collapse, not societal collapse, civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that all of you manage to make a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Thanks again, and good night.